Okay, so let me get this straight. A federal judge just permanently blocked Trump's executive order on elections because the president has zero constitutional authority over state election law. His DOJ is quietly dismantling 50 years of disability rights through an internal memo, and his rally crowd walked out mid-speech. One news cycle. We've got Ari Melber on why that ruling was inevitable, Alison Barkoff on the DOJ memo reversing decades of protections, and Jared Poland on the rally nobody stayed for. Hit subscribe and let's get into it.
Now, let me tell you off top tonight, this loss is rooted in the Constitution. The president has no power to change this. Not the current president, not future presidents. This happens to be a Republican president who wants to do it, but if a Democrat tried the same gambit in the future, our system says no. Now, like many of Trump's fanciful executive orders, just trying to write down that he wished he had more power than he gets under the Constitution does not create that power. It actually doesn't do anything for him. And the judge is reiterating that, which is something everyone learns in law school. The president does not control elections or rewrite their local rules because the states alone determine voter eligibility requirements. The judge writing the Constitution doesn't grant the president any powers over the elections, and the states know that, and the judges know that. Obviously, their job is to interpret the law. Trump's lawyers know that. We'll take this back to me, yeah. I'm going to explain this in a second, but Trump's lawyers know that. Trump's lawyers basically let him barrel towards this loss rather than saving him the embarrassment, because as I'm telling you tonight, this was going to happen. You weren't going to just suddenly rewrite the Constitution to get control of elections. And now I'm going to explain.
All right, so let's actually unpack what just happened. A federal judge, U.S. District Court Judge Denise Casper in Boston, just permanently blocked Donald Trump's March 2025 executive order that tried to force proof of citizenship requirements onto federal voter registration forms. And Ari is not editorializing when he says the president has no authority here. This is the Elections Clause, Article 1, Section 4, which says state legislatures set the time, place, and manner of federal elections. Full stop. Congress can supersede those rules. The president cannot. That's not a liberal reading of the Constitution. That is the reading that has existed since ratification. And here's the thing. The National Voter Registration Act, passed in 1993, already specifies exactly what federal agencies can require on those forms. Citizenship proof isn't on the list. Never was. So the executive order was unconstitutional on day one. And Judge Casper said so plainly. Her ruling found that the DOJ, quote, failed to demonstrate the widespread illegal voting they used to justify the whole thing. Zero evidence for the premise. Zero authority to act on it. And in the meantime, thousands of real voters would have been disenfranchised. That's documented. That's not debatable.
Led disability enforcement work at the Department of Justice. She is currently the director of the Hirsch Health Law and Policy Program at George Washington University, and she joins me now. Allison, walk us through what this memo would mean in practice.
So this memo is shocking in its reversal of 50 years of policy by the United States government that states should provide services to people with disabilities in their own homes and in their own communities instead of locking them away in institutions, hiding them away from society. And what this means in this reversal is that the main enforcer of disability rights laws has now said, we are not going to continue with that work. That's going to mean settlement agreements being undone, new positions in court, and the memo talks about undoing decades-long regulations that have been in place.
Okay, and here's where this gets genuinely infuriating. What Alison Barkoff just described is not a minor policy tweak. This is a June 18th DOJ Office of Legal Counsel opinion written by Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Lenora Pettit that tells states they no longer have to fund community-based care for people with disabilities. They can route Medicaid dollars back into institutions instead. Nursing homes, group facilities, psychiatric wards, away from people's own homes and communities. And Bloomberg Law has reporting by Ben Penn that Stephen Miller personally drove this memo, not through Congress, not through legislation, through an internal DOJ opinion. No vote, no debate, in the dark. Now, here's the receipt everyone needs. The Olmstead decision, that's a 1999 Supreme Court ruling, held that unjustified institutionalization is discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. 9 justices. The ADA itself passed in 1990 with bipartisan support, signed by George H.W. Bush. This is not some left-wing framework. Republicans and Democrats built this together over 50 years. So let me make sure the math is clear here. Stephen Miller's DOJ just wrote a memo telling states they can ignore a Supreme Court ruling and gut protections that 2 parties spent half a century building. The official White House position is that Miller had nothing to do with it. Pick whichever explanation makes you feel better. But the people most affected aren't lobbyists. They're Americans with disabilities who spent decades fighting for the right to live outside an institution. That's what's on the table.
The speech was definitely a short one by Trump standards. I've watched hundreds of Trump speeches since I've started working for the Bulwark, and his speech last night came in just a little under 30 minutes. And a lot of the crowd there, I would say, were definitely not your typical sycophantic, super Trump crazy supporter. There were definitely some of those there towards the front, but a lot of the people hanging out towards the back that I talked to, this had been their first Trump rally. And there were some people towards the front that I had talked to that actually it was his 116th Trump rally. And so those people I imagine stayed, but a lot of people got their picture of Trump and headed for the gates.
Trump is obsessed with late night, so I will show you how late night covered this. This is Jimmy Fallon.
Well, tonight, President Trump headlined a rally to celebrate America's 250th after all the musical artists dropped out of his concert. It's the first event where BYOB means bring your own band and the old one. Tonight included a military flyover, Lee Greenwood singing God Bless the USA, and a speech by Trump. Even Trump's biggest fans were like, is this a repeat? Because I feel like I've seen this before.
And then there's the rally, America 250, Trump's kickoff event for the nation's 250th anniversary on the National Mall. Martina McBride pulled out, Bret Michaels pulled out, Young MC, Morris Day and The Time, C+C Music Factory, all pulled out. So Trump stepped in as the headliner himself and claimed roughly 45,000 people attended. And what Jared Polin just broke down is that the people who did show up were leaving mid-speech. At Trump's own signature event, this is the man who sent Sean Spicer to fight the press over inauguration crowd numbers in January 2017. This is the man who has spent nearly a decade treating crowd size as a personal proxy for political legitimacy. And at his own July 4th kickoff, people are filing for the exits. I could not write this if I tried. And I write commentary for a living. But here's the bigger picture. Because these 3 stories are not disconnected. This is one pattern. Executive overreach on elections. Permanently blocked in federal court. Because the president had no authority to begin with. 50 years of disability rights dismantled through an internal DOJ memo, never voted on, driven by one of the most powerful unelected officials in Washington. And a base showing visible signs of fatigue at the events designed to energize them. So here's the line, if someone brings this up. The Trump administration is losing in federal court on elections. Reversing Supreme Court precedent on disability rights through a backdoor memo and headlining rallies that its own crowd walks out of. That's the record. That's documented. That's not debatable. Hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to see it. I'll catch you in the next one.